You're listening to Great Life, Great Career with Scott Miller, brought to you by FranklinCovey.
Welcome back to Great Life, Great Career. This is Scott Miller. Our second guest today is the renowned marriage couples therapist, Jen Elmquist, author of the new book, Relationship Reset, Secrets from a Couples Therapist That Will Revolutionize Your Love for a Lifetime. Jen, welcome to Great Life, Great Career.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, I think your number one fan is my wife, Stephanie Miller, because she can't wait for what is going to revolutionize our love for a lifetime. I mentioned to you off air, my wife and I are coming up on our 10-year wedding anniversary, and that would be exciting. It would be exciting if we didn't have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they weren't all boys. So I hope to get some great insight on how to reset the love in our marriage as well.
Yeah. Well, happy to give, and congratulations. 10 years is a milestone, and I think kids typically are one of the more desired purposes of that. So good for you.
It is. You've got exactly 18 minutes to fix the love in my marriage. My wife is listening as well. Jen, tell us about your journey of how you came to become a marriage and couples therapist and write this great practical book called Relationship Reset.
Oh, well, thank you. And, I think, passion needs to be rooted in your own personal experience. So I'm coming up on 28 years of marriage. We just launched 2
Show
kids.
off.
So I promise you it does end at some point down the road. But, marriage therapy was life-changing in our relationship early on. I spent most of my career avocationally in the healing arts. And then when I hit my 30s, went back to grad school, became a couples therapist. So I had all of this life experience behind me. And then after over a decade of the clinical experience and teaching grad school students how to do couples therapy and supervising couples therapy, blah, 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 I'm watching all of these couples come into my office and I'm thinking, man, if I could just get to them before they got to me, I think I could really make an impact. I know that the information that I learned in my marriage early on and the information I was sharing with couples in my office was life-changing, but statistics say they were getting it 6 years too late. Couples have problems for up to 6 years before they seek any kind of help. And even then, over half couples don't seek help at all in their relationship. So I wanted to get on that front end, go from one-to-one to one-to-many.
Jen, I have a friend named Hayden Shaw, who's a FranklinCovey leadership consultant. He's also a minister, does some therapy. He once told me that marriages don't end over sort of one explosive event or such. It usually it's kind of like just like the drip, drip, drip of issues. What's your insight around his premise?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's typically the accumulation of unaddressed or negative experiences over time. And actually, in my book, one of the very first sections I call the core elements. And those are things that I normalize for couples across the board. So when couples would come and see me, they would tell me their problems to them were so big and they were so isolated. And I'm not minimizing that because I know that's what they were feeling. But I already met with 10 other people that week that had the same big problems that felt enormously isolated in their relationship. And I think what happens is we don't always know what's normal in a couple's relationship, right? So it's normal you're going to have conflict. It's normal you're going to have uncomfortable patterns in your relationship. It's normal your relationship's going to change over time. But the duration of experiencing those things with one another becomes exhausting. And I think that's the accumulation of problems that couples finally get to a place with each other and they think these are so unique to our relationship. They're so difficult. There doesn't seem to be a path out of it. No one else is going through it. So there must be something uniquely wrong with us.
Jen, your book is enormously practical. I recommend it for every marriage. My wife and I have begun reading it. One of the insights I found that was so profound is that you mentioned that our inner emotional world has kind of the greatest influence on the success and satisfaction of our marriage. You talk also about self-regulation. Talk about the contributions that our inner emotional world have as it relates to our successful marriage.
Well, what you're nailing there is something that is probably baseline for how I look at relationships across the board, and that's that relationships matter. We are in relationship from the day we are born, and your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others, and your relationship with the environments around you either make or break your satisfaction in life. And it all starts with that relationship with yourself. So that's where we really get to that self-regulation of understanding yourself, your emotions, what are those emotions telling you? And then how can you share those emotions with the people that matter to you? If you don't have good skills, and many of us don't, we're not taught that. We're not taught that in our family of origin, usually because our parents aren't great at that. And then we aren't taught that necessarily in school either. So those basic skills of how do I regulate my own emotions and how do I communicate them effectively, oftentimes we just kind of bumble along in life and we learn that by experience. It becomes hit or miss. So really that good work of understanding that my experiences create my thoughts build my beliefs create my emotions. I'm in control of that whole process. It's not something that's happening on the outside of me and then affecting me. It's something that's happening on the inside of me. And when I can learn to control my own thoughts, shift my own beliefs, and modify my own emotions and communicate that effectively, man, that's life-changing in relationships.
Our guest today on Great Life, Great Career is Jen Elmquist, the marriage and family therapist, author of the new book, Relationship Reset. Get practical, Jen. What are some of the things that couples do to unintentionally undermine their relationship with each other?
Well, I think one of the first things that oftentimes happens is when you're not happy in your relationship, one of the first most natural things to do is to blame your partner, right? So I know in my relationship over the years, as a matter of fact, I have a chapter called Stopping the Train, and that's about the train of your own negative thinking in your relationship. And I can remember times for a number of years, had the privilege of working very part-time and being able to be home and raise my kids, which was really, really wonderful, and it was a luxury. But I remember those years in our relationship, there was always this challenge because my husband would go off to work and I would be left at home, and there would be all these kind of tasks that I'd be taking care of at home. And I remember standing one day looking out the kitchen window, and he had forgotten to take the trash out that day. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, why does he forget things all the time? He tends to be so forgetful. He's forgot to take the trash out. Now I have to do it. That's super inconvenient for me. And you know what? At the end of the day, by him not taking the trash out, I really think he's trying to communicate that he doesn't really care about me. It just became this negative role that day. And all of a sudden I find myself in this negative thought train, and I'm blaming him for something that at the end of the day just didn't matter at all. And I think when couples can start to learn that their partner is not the first place to place blame, and that if you can control your own negative thinking and start shifting that to more neutral or positive thinking in your relationship, it can actually make a huge difference.
You know, Jen, it's a great insight. I host a program called On Leadership for FranklinCovey, and one of the recent guests was the famed psychologist Susan David. She wrote a book called Emotional Agility. And she talked about this idea that, our thoughts and our emotions are just that. They're not facts, that they are our thoughts and our emotions. And that once we have sort of a cognition of what they are, we don't allow them to become trains or train wrecks, in our families and our marriages and such.
Yeah.
Great insight. You also talk about mapping your journey as a couple and how important it is to understand that all relationships have stages of development. Talk about that and kind of what practically can couples do to realize what stage are they in and what type of nurturing does that require?
I think stages are incredibly important. The one thing that's most important about that is understanding that your relationship is going to change over time. Your partner is going to change over time. Our couples research tells us that if you're with somebody in a long-term commitment, you're probably going to have at minimum 4 different relationships. So you're going to have this great kind of, we meet each other, we fall in love, we have this honeymoon relationship. Then traditionally, if you bring children into that relationship, you're going to build your family system. And you were saying that with your 3 boys. Oh my gosh, does that ever change a relationship?
Well, let me tell you, my honeymoon lasted 9 days. My wife got pregnant about 10 days into our marriage. So that honeymoon period was very short.
You had that's such a big change. And, that happens in those little monsters. They grow up and they leave, and then your relationship changes all over again. You think about the huge change that hits couples when retirement happens, and all of a sudden you have this free time and you have more time to spend with each other than you ever have before. So in the most traditional sense, we can see 4 different relationships right there. But I think what couples need to understand is that when things change, we become incredibly uncomfortable. What change tends to signal for us is not always exciting. I'm looking forward to this. It's usually, oh no, there's a problem. and what are we going to do about it? So I know that one of the ways that couples can navigate a relationship more successfully is by anticipating the fact that things are going to change. And when things are changing, being able to look at each other as teammates and say, wow, this is uncomfortable. Like, I'm not too sure. We were there with each other, and now we're here, and I'm not even too sure where we're going from the place we are right now. But I'd really want to make sure we go there together. So let's acknowledge this is uncomfortable. Let's look at what was and what is and how we want things to be. And then let's start to have navigating conversations rather than change becoming the thing that is divisive and puts us kind of into our own silos. Let's make change something that we're navigating together.
Jen, we have no shortage of questions today, so I want to get to a couple more here. I don't think it's true. My experience hasn't been that having children makes your marriage stronger. I'm sure that's true for someone out there, but not for me. What advice would you give to parents like my wife and I that, we've been married for 10 years, hopefully 2 more months to go. Yep. And we have 3 boys, right? It was very stressful early on. What advice would you give to couples to make sure that their marriage is thriving, kind of independent of their children? Because your children can kind of suck the joy out of your marriage if you let them.
Yeah. Well, and it is important to know that, again, research will tell us that couples satisfaction does decrease when children enter the marriage. And yet at the same time, this is it's a very happy occasion. So on the surface, I think we feel like we have to portray, and maybe even more publicly than privately, the sense that isn't this wonderful, this baby's come into our relationship, we're building this family, and yet internally, couples are looking at each other going, oh my gosh, this is exhausting, and we don't have time for each other, and we're not having great sex anymore, and we're not being able to go out for dinner or go out to dates with each other or just have a quiet evening. And so it really does become something that you have to navigate, not only tactically. I think it's really important for couples to have that conversation of how do we share this responsibility. It is a shared responsibility that we've brought into the world. And then also, how do we maintain a mindset in our relationship so that we are moving forward in a positive direction with each other? Because the kids are going to be here for a period of time, but they're not the totality of your relationship. They weren't there in the beginning, and they actually aren't going to be there, most likely, in the end. So what you want is you want to see this, I think, as a legacy building activity as a couple. And so I love, there's an old philosophy, actually, it's on the soap bottles in the grocery store, the concept of seventh generation. But that's an old Iroquois Confederacy principle, the fact that what we do in our family or in our generation now is going to have an effect on 7 generations that follow us. And I think when couples can see that what they're doing by raising children together is not only an important experience in their relationship today, but this is something that has a legacy that's going to run for 7 generations. So how do we commit to that with a vision that we want to do this passionately and we want to do it well so that we look back on our fingerprint, not just in the moment of time that we're here, but in the generations that follow us.
We're talking today with Jen Elmquist, the couples therapist and author of the new book, Relationship Reset. Jen, let's do a speed round because I want to get a bunch of questions in. So keep your answers short but super impactful. Okay. What types of couples are most at risk for divorce?
I would say avoidant couples.
And what does that mean?
It's much better. Yeah, much better if you're passionate and you're actually speaking out your conflicts to one another. When you're avoidant and you're pushing stuff down and you're pushing it to the side, it's going to build up and it's going to come back to bite you.
I once read a research study that said that there was some correlation in happiness in marriage, not with how straight you talked or how much you communicated, but how nice you perceived your spouse to be. Have you heard of that? And has that been your experience at all?
I think there is a huge piece of what you're connecting there is a concept of compassion and empathy.
Right.
And that's that idea of, are you in your relationship because of what it gives you, or are you in your relationship because of what you can do for one another?
Wow. Kind of a spirit of abundance.
And, that reciprocity of, hey, I'm here to help you become the best version of yourself. You're here to help me become the best version of ourselves. And if that is the give and take that's going on in our relationship, gosh, we're going to be much more successful. What
happens when one person falls out of love? What should a couple do? And how do you know and how do you talk about that? How do you repair it?
Yeah, falling out of love to me is an indication that change is abreast in the relationship. So, love in and of itself, obviously it's an emotion. We feel it when we fall in love in the beginning, but love is also an action, and it's something that requires commitment, and it requires practice in a relationship. So when someone says, gosh, I feel like I've fallen out of love with you, what that means is we've lost our connection and we've lost our alignment. And that should be an alarm to the relationship that we actually have to double down and do some work to reconnect at this point. Now, it may be that reconnection is going to be challenging or difficult, but the effort has to be there if you want to give the relationship a chance.
Jen, part of your passion is helping to legitimize the value and accessibility of couples therapy and generally mental health. Talk a bit about, you've dedicated most of your life to this. What advice would you give a couple who's struggling, who just wants to be better, if they're not quite sure how to find a therapist or the stigma of it or what the process is? Give people kind of permission and maybe motivation to say, here's your first step and here's your second step. What should couples do?
Yeah. First of all, take a deep breath and stop being so hard on yourself. We don't know how to do relationships well. We're not necessarily taught how to do that. We're thrown into the experience with another person of learning how to do that. So see your relationship as a research project or a long-term learning play. And getting the help and education that you need should be a normal part of that process. And then the second piece is don't be afraid to get help. We are not necessarily discouraged to go to our doctor and do an annual exam. We take care of our bodies. We're not even necessarily discouraged to go to a financial advisor and say, hey, can you help me do some planning? Because I don't necessarily want to work the rest of my life. In similar form, our relationships, our intimate relationships are as important as the health of our body and the health of our finances. So go get the help that you need so that relationship can be successful and great. And that's when I wrote Relationship Reset, it was on that premise that this is everything I wish my clients had known before they came to see me. I have a chapter in here dedicated on how to find a couples therapist. What are the questions that you should be asking them when you call them and interview them? And I give some websites that you can go to find a local therapist. So even picking up my book, it's going to teach you some of those great basics on relationships and give you a guide on how to find the help you need.
Jen, the book is uber practical. I recommend it to everyone, regardless of the type of relationship you're in. What advice would you give to couples on the best way to how to use your book? Should both spouses buy it and read it together? What's the best way for your book to become a marriage manual?
Yes, I would say the best way you can do it is to have both partners buy it and read it together because, have your own little book club, let's say, right? And let that be your date night where you're reading through it. I've written it again in a really practical way, like you said, Scott, is that you can even go in and kind of just pick one chapter. Every single one of the chapters have exercises at the end of them and some strong takeaways. So as a couple, I know life is busy and it can be overwhelming sometimes to pick up a book and read it from beginning to end. So I suggest just pick a chapter, read the chapter, do the exercise. Maybe that's your one, date night. If you can do a date night weekly or biweekly, you're using a chapter for a date night.
Jen, for those listeners who are in some type of committed relationships, married, not married, same sex, doesn't matter, what advice would you give people on something they can do after this program to measurably increase the mutual satisfaction in their relationship, marriage or otherwise?
That is a wonderful, wonderful question. We're touched recently in my community. We had a man in the business that I work with that recently passed away, and his service was enormously powerful. And I do work in a corporation here where I'm coaching a number of individuals, and I've had a dozen of them come in and tell me this story, and I think it plays so well into couple relationships. But when they talked about who this man was, they said he was a man that when you were with him, it wasn't I'm here, it was there you are. And so when he showed up, it wasn't, hey, everybody look at me, here I am. It was, there you are, I see you, and I see what's going on with you. And I think that's extraordinarily powerful in couple relationships, is not showing up saying, here I am, make me happy. But it's there you are. I chose you. I love you. How are you? And being present for your partner makes an extraordinary difference in a relationship.
So, Jim, my wife and I are penciled in tomorrow from 1 to 2, okay, with you.
Sounds good. We'd have a great time.
We'll get you a plane ticket. Jen Elmquist, thank you for joining Great Life, Great Career.
Thank you, Scott.